The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under Ethan Caldwell's apartment door like a thief in the night. Its edges were yellowed, the handwriting sharp and unfamiliar. But the words inside gutted him. Your father isn't dead. They lied. For 30 years, Ethan had believed his father, Samuel, died in a car accident when he was 2, a tragedy his family spoke of in hushed tones before changing the subject. He sat on the cold hardwood floor of his San Francisco studio, the letter trembling in his hands. The city buzzed outside, cable cars clanging, seagulls crying, but Ethan's world was silent, save for the pounding of his heart. His mother, Margaret, had always painted Samuel as a saint, a hard-working accountant who loved his family until a drunk driver stole him away. But this letter, unsigned and cryptic, suggested something darker. A secret buried so deep it had fractured his family for decades. Ethan, a 30-year-old graphic designer with a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, couldn't let it go. His brown eyes, inherited from the father he barely remembered, scanned the letter again. The words they lied burned into him. Who were they? His mother? His Uncle Richard? The family patriarch who never smiled? Or someone else entirely? He rummaged through a box of old photos, pulling out the only one he had of Samuel, a faded Polaroid of a man with a warm smile, standing in front of a San Francisco bookstore, a rainbow pin glinting on his jacket. The pin. Ethan's breath caught. He'd never noticed it before, but now it screamed significance. Was his father gay? The thought landed like a stone in his chest. Growing up in the conservative Caldwell household, gay was a word whispered in judgment, never celebration. If Samuel had been gay, why had his family erased him? Ethan needed answers, and he needed them now. He started with his mother, Margaret, a 60-year-old woman whose life revolved around her church choir and her meticulously curated image of perfection. She lived in a modest house in Sacramento, where Ethan drove the next morning, the letter tucked into his jacket. The 2-hour drive gave him time to stew, his mind racing with questions. Why had she never remarried? Why did she flinch when he asked about Samuel's life? When he arrived, Margaret greeted him with her usual stiff hug, her gray eyes scanning him like she could sense his intent. Mom, I got this, Ethan said, holding out the letter. Her face paled as she read it, her hands trembling. What does it mean? Is Dad alive? Margaret's lips tightened. It's nonsense, Ethan. Some cruel prank. Your father died in 1995. You know that. Then why does this say he didn't? Ethan pressed, his voice rising. And why do we never talk about him? I don't even know what he was like. He was a good man, she snapped, turning to the kitchen counter, busying herself with a dish towel. That's all you need to know. But Ethan wasn't a child anymore, content with half-truths. He noticed the way her hands shook, the way her eyes darted to a locked drawer in the living room. That night, after she went to bed, he pried it open. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to Samuel, postmarked after his supposed death. The return address was a P.O. box in San Francisco, signed only with the initial L. Ethan's heart raced. His father might still be alive. Or, at the very least, someone had known him well enough to write to him after 1995. He pocketed the letters and drove back to San Francisco before dawn, the city's fog wrapping around him like a shroud. Back in his apartment, he spread the letters out, each one a piece of a puzzle. They were love letters, tender and aching, written by someone named Lucas. I miss you at the bookstore, one read. I miss your laugh at the rallies. I miss us. Lucas. The name sparked something. Ethan's father had worked at a bookstore in the Castro district, San Francisco's vibrant gay neighborhood. Was Lucas his lover? Ethan's mind spun. He wasn't ready to confront the possibility that his father had lived a secret life, but he couldn't stop now. He Googled the bookstore Rainbow Pages, a historic hub for the LGBT community. It was still open, though barely, clinging to life in a gentrified city. The next day, Ethan walked into Rainbow Pages, the bell above the door jingling softly. The air smelled of old paper and coffee. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes framed by wire glasses. His name tag read Lucas. "Are you Lucas?" Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. The man nodded, his smile fading as he saw Ethan's intensity. "Who's asking?" "I'm Ethan Caldwell, Samuel Caldwell's son." Lucas froze, his hand gripping the counter. For a moment, Ethan thought he might collapse. "Samuel's son," Lucas whispered, his eyes glistening. "You look just like him." They sat in the back of the bookstore, surrounded by shelves of queer literature. As Lucas told Ethan a story he'd never expected. Samuel had been openly gay, a proud activist in the 80s and early 90s, marching in pride parades, fighting for AIDS awareness. He'd loved Lucas fiercely, but his family, Margaret, Richard, and the rest had disowned him when he came out. They declared him dead to them, spreading the car accident lie to erase his truth. "He didn't die in a crash, did he?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking. Lucas shook his head, tears falling. "No. He died in 2000 from AIDS complications. I was with him until the end. Your family, they didn't want you to know who he really was." Ethan felt the world tilt. His father had been alive for 5 years after the supposed accident, living a life Ethan had never known. A life of love, courage, and pain. And his family had buried it all. Anger surged through him, but so did a strange sense of connection. For the first time, he felt close to the father he'd lost, not the Saint Margaret had invented, but the real Samuel, flawed and brave. He left the bookstore with a journal Lucas gave him, one Samuel had kept during his final years. As Ethan read it that night, his father's words came alive. "I hope one day my son knows I loved him, even if I couldn't be there. I hope he lives in a world kinder than mine." Ethan vowed to uncover every truth his family had hidden, no matter the cost. Ethan's apartment became a war room, the journal and letters spread across his coffee table like evidence in a trial. Samuel's words haunted him, each page revealing a man who'd fought for love and acceptance in a world that often offered neither. One entry, dated 1997, read, "Margaret called today. She wants me to disappear, to spare Ethan the shame. I told her I'd rather die than deny who I am." Ethan's stomach churned. His mother had known Samuel was alive and chose to lie. He needed to confront her again, but first he wanted more of the truth. Lucas had mentioned a friend of Samuel's, Mia Torres, a 55-year-old trans woman who'd been part of their activist circle. Ethan found her on social media, her profile filled with photos of pride marches and community fundraisers. She agreed to meet him at a cafe in the Mission District, a place buzzing with artists and activists. Mia was a force vibrant with a laugh that filled the room. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much but refused to break. "Samuel was my rock," she said, stirring her coffee. He and Lucas were inseparable, always planning the next rally or fundraiser. "Your dad had this fire in him, Ethan. He believed in a better world." "Then why did he leave me?" Ethan asked, his voice raw. "If he was so brave, why didn't he fight to stay in my life?" Mia's expression softened. "He tried. Your mother and uncle threatened to cut you off completely if he didn't stay away. They said they'd tell you he was a monster, a sinner. Samuel thought letting you grow up without that poison was the best he could do." Ethan clenched his fists, anger flaring at his family's cruelty. "They told me he died in a car crash. They erased him." Mia nodded, her eyes glistening. "They erased a lot of us back then. The 90s were brutal, losing friends to AIDS, fighting for visibility. Your dad was at every protest, even when he was sick. He wanted you to inherit a world where you could be yourself, whoever that is." Ethan didn't know who he was anymore. He'd grown up straight, never questioning his identity, but learning about Samuel's life stirred something in him, a curiosity, a need to understand. Mia gave him a stack of old flyers from the bookstore, each one advertising events Samuel had organized. One caught his eye, a 1998 AIDS memorial event, with a photo of Samuel and Lucas holding hands, their faces defiant and hopeful. That night, Ethan drove to Sacramento again, the flyers and journal in his passenger seat. He didn't call ahead. He wanted to catch Margaret off guard. When she opened the door, her face hardened. "Ethan, it's late. We need to talk," he said, pushing past her into the living room. He dropped the journal on the coffee table. "Dad was alive until 2000. You lied to me. Why?" Margaret's composure cracked, her hands twisting together. "You don't understand. He chose that lifestyle. He abandoned us." "He didn't abandon me," Ethan shouted. "You and Uncle Richard forced him out because he was gay. You told me he was dead to protect your perfect little world." Margaret sank into a chair, her face crumpling. "I thought I was protecting you. The church, the community, they would have shunned us. I couldn't let you grow up with that stigma." "Stigma?" Ethan's voice broke. "He was my father. He loved me, and you stole him from me." Silence hung heavy between them. Margaret's tears fell, but Ethan felt no sympathy. He grabbed the journal and left, the door slamming behind him. Back in San Francisco, he pored over Samuel's words, each entry a window into a life of courage. One passage stood out. "I met a kid today, Jamie, 16, kicked out for being trans. I gave them a place to stay. I wish I could do the same for Ethan." The name Jamie sparked a memory. Lucas had mentioned a Jamie Rivera, now a 40-year-old non-binary activist running a youth shelter in Oakland. Ethan reached out, and Jamie agreed to meet him at their shelter, a colorful building filled with art and laughter. Jamie was warm but guarded, their dark eyes assessing Ethan as they sat in a quiet office. "Your dad saved my life," Jamie said. "I was on the streets, scared and alone. Samuel took me in, gave me a job at the bookstore. He said family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose you." Ethan's throat tightened. "Did he talk about me?" "All the time," Jamie said, smiling softly. "He carried your picture in his wallet. He'd say, 'My kid's gonna change the world someday.' He believed in you, Ethan." Tears stung Ethan's eyes. For the first time, he felt his father's love, not as a myth but as a tangible force. But the more he learned, the angrier he grew at his family's betrayal. He needed to know why they'd gone to such lengths to erase Samuel. The answer, he suspected, lay with his Uncle Richard, the family's enforcer, a man whose disapproval could silence a room. Ethan tracked Richard down at his law firm in Sacramento, a cold, glass building that matched his uncle's demeanor. Richard, 65, with thinning gray hair and a perpetual scowl, barely looked up from his desk when Ethan walked in. "I know the truth about Dad," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Why did you lie? Why did you make him disappear?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Your father made his choices. He chose sin over family. We did what was necessary." "Necessary?" Ethan spat. "You declared him dead. You let me grow up thinking I'd lost him forever." Richard leaned back, his eyes cold. "You're better off not knowing the man he became. He was a disgrace." Ethan's hands shook with rage, but he held his ground. "The only disgrace is what you and Mom did to him. I'm gonna find out everything, Uncle Richard. Every secret you buried." As he stormed out, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Samuel's journal hinted at one final piece of the puzzle. A safe deposit box in San Francisco, its contents a mystery even to Lucas. Whatever was inside, Ethan was determined to find it and to reclaim his father's legacy. Ethan's search for the safe deposit box consumed him. Samuel's journal mentioned it in a cryptic entry from 1999. "If anything happens to me, the box at First Coastal Bank holds the truth. Keys with Lucas." Ethan called Lucas, who admitted he'd kept the key all these years, tucked away in a drawer at Rainbow Pages. "I didn't know what it was for," Lucas said, his voice heavy with regret. "Samuel said it was for you when you were ready." They met at the bookstore, where Lucas handed Ethan a small, tarnished key. The weight of it felt monumental, like it could unlock more than just a box. Ethan drove to First Coastal Bank, a sleek building in downtown San Francisco, his mind racing with possibilities. What could his father have hidden? Letters? A will? Or something that would finally explain why his family had gone to such lengths to erase him? Inside the bank, Ethan's hands trembled as he opened the safe deposit box. It contained a single envelope, addressed to him in Samuel's neat handwriting. Inside were two things, a letter and a small leather-bound notebook. The letter began, "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, you've found the truth I couldn't tell you myself." Samuel wrote of his love for Ethan, his pain at being forced away, and his hope that Ethan would live authentically, no matter who he loved. The notebook was a record of his activism names, dates, and details of the fights he'd fought for the LGBT community, including a list of donations he'd made to shelters and clinics. But one entry stopped Ethan cold. "Richard threatened to expose me to the firm unless I left. He said he'd ruin us both. I can't let him hurt Ethan." Ethan's uncle wasn't just complicit been the architect of Samuel's exile. The realization hit like a punch. Richard's law firm, built on conservative clients, would have crumbled if Samuel's sexuality became public. So Richard had forced him out, using Ethan as leverage. Ethan drove back to Sacramento, the letter and notebook burning a hole in his bag. He didn't confront Richard immediately. He needed more ammunition. He reached out to Mia again, who introduced him to Alex Nguyen, a 45-year-old gay man who'd been Samuel's lawyer. Alex worked out of a small office in Oakland, his desk piled with legal files. He remembered Samuel vividly. "Your dad came to me in '95, Alex said, leaning back in his chair. "He wanted to set up a trust for you, but your family blocked it." Richard got a court order claiming Samuel was unfit mental instability. They said. It was a lie, but they had money and influence. Samuel didn't stand a chance. Ethan's jaw clenched. Why didn't he fight back? "He did," Alex said. "But he was sick by then, and he didn't want you caught in the crossfire. He signed away his parental rights to protect you from their lies." The weight of his father's sacrifice settled over Ethan. Samuel had given up everything: his family, his rights, his Lafido shield Ethan from the Caldwell family's venom. But Ethan wasn't a child anymore. He could fight back. He asked Alex to pull every legal document tied to Samuel's case. If Richard had manipulated the courts, there had to be a paper trail. Over the next week, Ethan and Alex dug through old records, uncovering a web of deceit. Richard had paid off a judge to seal Samuel's records, claiming it was to protect the family name. But one document stood out: a restraining order against Samuel, filed by Margaret in 1996, alleging he was a danger to Ethan. It was a lie, backed by fabricated testimony from Richard's colleagues. Ethan's anger grew, but so did his resolve. He went back to Rainbow Pages, where Lucas and Mia helped him connect with others who'd known Samuel. Each story painted a picture of a man who'd never stopped fighting, even as his health failed. One woman, Sarah, a 50-year-old lesbian who'd volunteered with Samuel, told Ethan about a protest they'd organized in 1998. "Your dad was weak from chemo, but he stood out there with us, holding a sign that said, 'Love is not a sin.' He was thinking of you." Ethan's heart ached. He wanted to honor his father's legacy, but first, he had to dismantle the lies. He confronted Margaret again, this time with the legal documents. She was in her garden, pruning roses, when he arrived. "You filed a restraining order against Dad," he said, holding up the paper. "You called him a danger to me." "Why?" Margaret froze, her shears clattering to the ground. "I had no choice," she whispered. "Richard said it was the only way to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Ethan demanded. "From knowing my father? From knowing he loved me?" Tears streamed down Margaret's face, but Ethan felt no pity. "You let Richard control you," he said. "You let him erase Dad's life." Margaret reached for him, but Ethan stepped back. "I'm done with your lies," he said. "I'm going to make this right." Back in San Francisco, Ethan met with Jamie at the youth shelter. They were organizing a memorial for Samuel, a way to celebrate his life and activism. Jamie suggested Ethan speak at the event, to share what he'd learned. The idea terrified him. Wasn't an activist, wasn't even sure where he fit in this world his father had fought for. But he agreed. He owed Samuel that much. As the memorial approached, Ethan pored over the notebook, memorizing every name and story. He found an entry about a young man named Chris, a 25-year-old who'd been kicked out by his family for being gay. Samuel had helped him get back on his feet. Ethan tracked Chris down, now a 50-year-old teacher in Berkeley. Over coffee, Chris shared how Samuel's kindness had given him hope. "He told me family isn't who you're born to, it's who you choose," Chris said, echoing Jamie's words. Ethan realized his father's legacy wasn't just in the protests or the donations, it was in the lives he'd touched. People like Jamie, Chris, and Lucas carried Samuel's light. And now Ethan would too. But first, he had to face Richard one last time, to expose the truth and reclaim his father's name. The memorial was set for a Saturday evening at Rainbow Pages. The bookstore transformed into a sanctuary of memory. Photos of Samuel lined the walls, marching at Pride, laughing with Lucas, reading to kids at the shelter. Ethan helped set up, his hands shaking as he hung a banner that read, "For Samuel Caldwell, love lives on." The weight of speaking loomed over him, but he felt Samuel's presence in every photo, every story shared by the growing crowd. Lucas introduced Ethan to more of Samuel's friends, people who'd fought alongside him in the 80s and 90s, their faces weathered but their spirits unbroken. There was Elena, a 60-year-old lesbian who'd organized AIDS fundraisers with Samuel, and Marcus, a 55-year-old gay man who'd been arrested with him at a protest. Each story added depth to the father Ethan had lost, but also fueled his anger at the family who'd erased him. As the memorial began, Ethan stood at the front, clutching Samuel's journal. The room was packed, activists, friends, and strangers whose lives Samuel had touched. Lucas spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "Samuel believed love was worth fighting for," he said. "He fought for all of us, and for his son, Ethan, who's here to honor him tonight." Ethan stepped forward, his throat tight. "I grew up thinking my father died in a car accident," he began, his voice trembling. "But that was a lie. My mother, my uncle told me he was dead because he was gay. They buried his truth to protect their own shame." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others wiping tears. "But I found him. Through his journal, his friends, his love for this community. He was a hero, and I'm proud to be his son." The room erupted in applause, but Ethan's heart was heavy. He'd exposed his family's lies, but Richard still held power. Ethan had learned from Alex that Richard's law firm was facing a lawsuit from a former client, a case tied to the same judge who'd sealed Samuel's records. If Ethan could prove Richard's corruption, he could unravel the lies for good. He met Alex the next day at a diner, where they pored over the lawsuit details. The client, a woman named Linda, claimed Richard had bribed the judge to sway a property dispute in the 90s. Alex suspected the same judge had been paid to seal Samuel's records. "If we can get Linda to talk," Alex said, "we might have enough to reopen your dad's case." Ethan tracked Linda down to a small house in Fresno. She was 70, frail but sharp, her eyes wary as she invited him in. "I don't like talking about Richard Caldwell," she said. "He ruined my life." "I'm his nephew," Ethan said, "but I'm not here to defend him. He ruined my life too, by lying about my father." Linda's expression softened. She told Ethan how Richard had manipulated her case, using his influence to strip her of her family's land. "He bragged about owning the judge," she said. "Said he could make anyone disappear." Ethan's blood ran cold. Richard hadn't just erased Samuel's life, he'd built a career on burying truths. Armed with Linda's testimony, Ethan and Alex filed a motion to unseal Samuel's records. The process was slow, but Ethan kept busy, volunteering at Jamie's shelter and helping plan a pride event in Samuel's honor. He met more of his father's chosen family, including Tara, a 35-year-old bisexual woman who'd been mentored by Samuel as a teen. "He taught me to be proud," she said, showing Ethan a rainbow pin Samuel had given her. "He'd be so proud of you." Ethan wasn't so sure. He felt like a fraud, a straight man stepping into a world he barely understood. But Lucas reassured him. "Your dad didn't care about labels," he said. "He cared about heart. You're here, fighting for him. That's enough." The court date arrived, a tense morning in a Sacramento courtroom. Richard was there, his face a mask of disdain. Margaret sat in the back, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge, a new one untainted by Richard's influence, reviewed Linda's testimony and the motion to unseal Samuel's records. Ethan took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted his father's life and the lies that had buried it. "My uncle used his power to erase my father," Ethan said, staring at Richard. "He called him a disgrace. But the real disgrace is a family that chooses hate over love." The judge granted the motion, ordering Samuel's records unsealed. Ethan felt a weight lift, but the victory was bittersweet. Richard stormed out, refusing to meet Ethan's eyes. Margaret approached him afterward, her face pale. "I didn't know it would hurt you this much," she whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Ethan shook his head. "You chose Richard over Dad. Over me. I don't know if I can forgive that." Back in San Francisco, Ethan threw himself into the Pride event. He helped design posters, each one featuring Samuel's face and story. The event drew hundreds of activists, allies, and youth from Jamie's shelter. Ethan spoke again, this time with more confidence, sharing Samuel's journal entries about love and resilience. The crowd cheered, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged. But the notebook held one final secret, a list of names, labeled The Network. Samuel had been part of an underground group helping LGBT youth escape abusive families. Ethan realized his father's work wasn't done. He met with Jamie and Tara, proposing they revive the network using the shelter as a base. They agreed, and Ethan felt a spark of purpose. He wasn't just uncovering his father's truth, was carrying it forward. The unsealed records were a goldmine. Ethan spent days at Alex's office, sifting through court documents, letters, and financial transactions. One paper stood out, a 1995 agreement signed by Samuel, relinquishing his parental rights in exchange for Richard dropping a defamation lawsuit against him. The lawsuit claimed Samuel's lifestyle would ruin the family's reputation. It was blackmail, plain and simple, and Samuel had signed to protect Ethan. Ethan's anger boiled over. He wanted Richard to face consequences, not just for Samuel, but for everyone he'd hurt. Alex warned him it wouldn't be easy. "Richard's connected," he said. "He's got friends in high places, but we've got the truth." Ethan reached out to a journalist, Priya Sharma, a 40-year-old investigative reporter known for exposing corruption. Priya met him at a coffee shop in San Francisco, her notebook already open. "I've heard of your uncle," she said, her dark eyes sharp. "He's slippery, but if you've got evidence, I can help you nail him." Ethan handed her copies of the records, Linda's testimony, and Samuel's notebook. Priya's eyes widened as she read. "This isn't just about your dad," she said. "This is a pattern. Richard's been burying truths for decades, clients, rivals, anyone who threatened his image." While Priya worked on her story, Ethan focused on the network. Jamie and Tara had rallied a small group of volunteers, including Chris and Sarah, to help identify at-risk youth. Ethan designed a website, using his graphic design skills to create a platform where kids could safely reach out. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, a way to channel his grief into action. He thought of Samuel's journal entry. "Every kid deserves a chance to be themselves. That's worth fighting for." One night, Ethan got a call from Lucas. "There's someone you need to meet," he said. "She knew your dad better than anyone." The woman was Clara, a 65-year-old lesbian who'd been Samuel's best friend in the 80s. They met at her apartment in the Castro, walls covered in photos from decades of activism. Clara's warm smile put Ethan at ease, but her stories broke his heart. "Your dad and I met at a bar in '83, she said, handing Ethan a photo of her and Samuel, arms around each other at a rally. He was scared to come out, but once he did, he was unstoppable. He dragged me to every protest, every fundraiser. He said it was for you, for the world you'd grow up in." Clara revealed another layer of Samuel's story. He'd been diagnosed with HIV in 1996, a secret he kept from most people to avoid pity. "He didn't want to be defined by his illness," she said. "He wanted to be defined by his love for Lucas, for you, for this community." Ethan's eyes burned with tears. Why didn't he reach out to me? Even once. Clara sighed. He wrote you letters, Ethan. Dozens of them. He gave them to me, said to hold on to them until you were ready. I think you are now. She handed him a box filled with envelopes, each addressed to Ethan in Samuel's handwriting. He read one that night, alone in his apartment. My boy, I dream of the day you'll know me. Not the man your family made me out to be, but the man who loves you more than life. Ethan sobbed, clutching the letter, feeling his father's presence closer than ever. Priya's article hit the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle a week later, titled The Cost of Secrets, A Family's Betrayal. It detailed Richard's corruption, from bribing judges to erasing Samuel's life. The story went viral, sparking outrage online. Ethan watched as Richard's law firm issued a statement, denying everything, but the damage was done. Clients dropped him, and the state bar launched an investigation. Margaret called Ethan, her voice trembling. You've ruined us, she said. Richard's firm is collapsing. The family's humiliated. You humiliated yourselves, Ethan replied. You could have chosen Dad. You could have chosen me. He hung up, his heart heavy but resolute. The network was growing, with more kids reaching out for help. Ethan met one, a 17-year-old named Riley, who'd been kicked out for being non-binary. Ethan saw Samuel in Riley's defiant eyes, and he vowed to be the kind of mentor his father had been. The Pride event was a week away, and Ethan threw himself into preparations. He designed a mural for the shelter, featuring Samuel's face and the words, "Love is not a sin." The community rallied around it, painting it on the shelter's exterior. As Ethan stood back, watching volunteers add their touches, he felt a shift. He wasn't just Samuel's son anymore, was part of something bigger. But Richard wasn't done. A letter arrived from his lawyer, threatening to sue Ethan for defamation. Alex laughed when he saw it. He's desperate, he said. This is a bluff. We've got the evidence, and he knows it. Ethan wasn't afraid. He'd faced worse than Richard's threats. He had Samuel's letters, his father's love, and a community that embraced him. For the first time, he felt ready to step into his father's shoes, not as a replacement, but as a continuation. The Pride event would be his chance to show the world who Samuel Caldwell really was. The Pride event dawned bright and chaotic, San Francisco streets alive with rainbow flags and music. Ethan stood at the shelter, now a hub for the network, watching volunteers set up booths and banners. The mural of Samuel gleamed in the sunlight, his smile a beacon for the crowd. Ethan felt his father's presence in every cheer, every hug, every story shared by those who'd known him. Jamie pulled Ethan aside, their eyes bright with excitement. We've got over 100 kids signed up for support, they said. Your dad would be proud. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He'd read more of Samuel's letters, each one a piece of his heart. One, dated 1999, read, Ethan, I hope you find a family who loves you for you. I'll always be yours, even if I'm gone. The event was a blur of speeches, performances, and tears. Ethan took the stage, holding Samuel's journal. My father was taken from me, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. Not by a car accident, but by a family who couldn't accept him. Samuel Caldwell was a fighter, a lover, a father. He built this community, and I'm here to carry it on. The crowd roared, and Ethan felt a surge of purpose. He spotted Lucas in the front row, tears streaming down his face, and Clara beside him, clapping fiercely. Mia, Tara, Chris, and Sarah were there too, their presence a reminder of the family Samuel had chosen. But as Ethan stepped off the stage, he saw a figure in the crowd that stopped him cold. Richard. His uncle stood at the edge of the event, his face unreadable. Ethan approached, his heart pounding. What are you doing here? He demanded. Richard's eyes were tired, his usual arrogance gone. I read the article, he said. I didn't expect it to go this far. Ethan crossed his arms. You mean you didn't expect to get caught? Richard flinched. I thought I was protecting the family. Your mother, our name. I was wrong. The admission stunned Ethan, but he wasn't ready to forgive. "You destroyed my father. You don't get to walk in here and say sorry." "I know," Richard said, his voice low, "but I want to make it right. I'm stepping down from the firm. The records, the bribes, it's all coming out. I won't fight you anymore." Ethan stared, unsure what to feel. Richard's surrender was a victory, but it didn't erase the pain. "This isn't about you," Ethan said. "It's about Dad, and I'm not done fighting for him." Richard nodded and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan turned back to the event, where Riley, the non-binary teen, was speaking about finding safety at the shelter. Ethan realized this was his father's legacy, not just the truth, but the lives it could save. After Pride, Ethan met with Priya, who was working on a follow-up story about the network. She'd uncovered more about Richard's dealings, including payments to silence other clients. "He's done," she said. "The bar's suspending his license. You did this, Ethan." But Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a son, piecing together a father he'd never known. He spent evenings with Lucas, Clara, and the others listening to their stories. Clara gave him Samuel's old jacket, the rainbow pin still attached. Ethan wore it to the shelter, where he met more kids like Riley, scared, but hopeful. One night, Ethan found a letter in the jacket's pocket, one Samuel hadn't sent. It was dated 2000, weeks before his death. "Ethan, if you ever doubt you're enough, remember you're mine. Live boldly, love fiercely. That's all I ever wanted." Ethan clutched the letter, tears falling. He'd spent his life feeling incomplete, but now he understood. Samuel had never left him. The network grew, with donations pouring in after Priya's second article. Ethan quit his design job to work full-time at the shelter, using his skills to create outreach materials. He wasn't an activist like Samuel, but he was learning. He started questioning his own identity, wondering if he'd ignored parts of himself to fit the Caldwell mold. Tara, who'd become a close friend, encouraged him to explore. "You don't need a label," she said. "Just be open." Ethan took her advice, attending community events and listening to stories. He felt a pull toward the queer community, not because he was sure of his own identity, but because it was where he felt closest to Samuel. One night, at a drag show fundraiser, he met Noah, a 32-year-old gay man with a quick wit and warm eyes. They talked for hours, and Ethan felt a spark he hadn't expected. He didn't tell Noah about Samuel right away, but when he did, Noah listened, his hand resting gently on Ethan's. "Your dad sounds like he'd love that you're here," Noah said. "Not just for him, but for you." Ethan smiled, feeling lighter. He wasn't sure where things would go with Noah, but he was open to finding out. For the first time, he felt like he was living for himself, not just for Samuel's memory. But the fight wasn't over. Margaret reached out asking to meet. Ethan agreed, but only on his terms at the shelter, surrounded by his new family. Margaret arrived at the shelter on a rainy afternoon, her usual composure replaced by uncertainty. Ethan led her inside, past the mural of Samuel, to a small office. The air was thick with tension, the weight of 30 years of lies hanging between them. Margaret's eyes lingered on the mural, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw regret. "I didn't come to fight," she said, her voice soft. "I came to listen." Ethan wasn't sure he believed her, but he sat down, Samuel's journal on the table. "Why now?" he asked. "After everything, why do you care?" Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. "The article. It made me see what I did to you, to Samuel. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, but the pain was too raw. "You let Richard control you," he said. "You let him erase Dad. You could have fought for him." "I was scared," she admitted, tears falling. "The church, the community, they would have judged us. I thought I was saving you from that." "You saved me from my father," Ethan said, his voice sharp. "You took away the one person who loved me for who I am." Margaret flinched, but she didn't look away. "I want to make it right, Ethan. I don't know how, but I want to try." Ethan didn't know if he could forgive her, but he saw something new in her eyes' vulnerability. He handed her Samuel's journal. "Read this," he said. "Know who he was. Then we'll talk." Margaret took the journal, her hands trembling. She left without another word, and Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. He didn't know if they'd ever rebuild what was broken, but he'd given her a chance. That was more than she'd given Samuel. The network kept Ethan grounded. He worked with Jamie and Tara to expand their outreach, connecting with schools and community centers. Riley, the non-binary teen, became a regular at the shelter, helping with events and sharing their story. Ethan saw Samuel in Riley's resilience, and it pushed him to keep going. Noah became a steady presence too. They went on walks through the Castro, talking about everything from Samuel's activism to their own dreams. Noah was a photographer, capturing the vibrancy of San Francisco's queer community. One evening, he showed Ethan a photo he'd taken at Pride. Ethan speaking on stage, Samuel's journal in hand, the crowd a blur of color behind him. "You look like him here," Noah said, pointing to Ethan's determined expression. Not just his face, but his fire. Ethan blushed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being seen not like this. With Noah, he felt safe to explore the parts of himself he'd buried, questions about his identity, his place in the world. He didn't have answers yet, but he was starting to ask the right questions. Priya's second article brought more attention to the network, and with it, more challenges. Richard's firm collapsed under the weight of the scandal, and he reached out to Ethan, asking for a meeting. Against his better judgment, Ethan agreed, meeting him at a park in Sacramento. Richard looked older, his shoulders slumped. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Richard said. "I know what I did, but I'm giving you everything, my files, my records. Do what you want with them." Ethan took the box of documents, stunned. Inside were emails, financial records, and memos detailing Richard's schemes, including his role in Samuel's exile. It was enough to bury him legally, but Ethan wasn't sure that was what he wanted anymore. Justice, yes, but revenge? He thought of Samuel's words, "Love fiercely." Maybe love meant letting go, not holding on to hate. He gave the documents to Alex, who worked with Priya to ensure Richard faced legal consequences. The state bar revoked his license, and a criminal investigation began. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction, but his focus was on the network. He and Jamie launched a mentorship program, pairing youth with volunteers like Clara and Marcus. Ethan mentored Riley, helping them navigate college applications and their own family struggles. One night, Noah invited Ethan to a gallery showing his photos, including the one from Pride. The room was filled with images of joy drag queens, couples holding hands, kids waving rainbow flags. Ethan felt a pang of pride, knowing Samuel had helped build this world. Noah took his hand, and Ethan didn't pull away. As they left the gallery, Ethan got a text from Margaret. She'd finished the journal and wanted to meet again. Ethan agreed, but this time he felt stronger. He wasn't just Samuel's son, was Ethan, building a life of his own. Whatever Margaret had to say, he was ready to face it, with Noah, Lucas, and his chosen family by his side. Margaret's second meeting was different. She arrived at the shelter with a box of her own photos, letters, and mementos from Samuel's early years. "I kept these hidden," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't let go of him, even when I tried." Ethan sifted through the box, finding pictures of Samuel as a young man, laughing with Margaret before everything fell apart. One photo showed them with baby Ethan, Samuel's eyes bright with love. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked. "You had these all along." "I was ashamed," Margaret said. "Not of him, but of myself. I let Richard and the church dictate my life. I didn't know how to face you after that." Ethan wanted to stay angry, but he saw her pain. She wasn't the villain he'd imagined, just a woman who'd made terrible choices out of fear. "I can't erase what you did," he said, "but I want to understand. Help me know him." They spent hours going through the box, Margaret sharing stories of Samuel's kindness, his love for music, his dreams of a family. She admitted she'd loved him, even after he came out, but couldn't reconcile it with her faith. "I was wrong," she said. "I see that now." Ethan didn't forgive her, not fully, but he felt a crack in the wall between them. He invited her to volunteer at the shelter, a small step toward healing. Margaret hesitated but agreed, starting with small tasks like organizing supplies. Ethan watched her interact with Riley and the other kids, seeing glimpses of the mother she might have been if fear hadn't won. The network's mentorship program grew, with Ethan and Noah working together to create a photography workshop for the youth. Noah's patience and humor balanced Ethan's intensity, and their relationship deepened. One night, over dinner at Noah's apartment, Ethan opened up about his confusion. "I've always thought I was straight," he said. "But being around you, this community, I'm not so sure." Noah smiled, his hand brushing Ethan's. "You don't need to figure it out tonight. Just keep exploring." Samuel would have wanted that. Ethan nodded, feeling a freedom he hadn't known before. He wasn't ready to label himself, but he was ready to live authentically, like his father had. He wore Samuel's jacket to every shelter event, the rainbow pin a quiet tribute. Richard's trial began, a media frenzy that Ethan tried to avoid. Priya kept him updated, reporting that Richard had pleaded guilty to lesser charges to avoid prison. The firm was dissolved, and Richard moved to a small town, out of the public eye. Ethan felt no joy in his uncle's fall, just a quiet resolve to keep building what Samuel had started. Clara invited Ethan to a vigil for AIDS victims, held at a park overlooking the bay. Hundreds gathered, lighting candles and sharing stories. Ethan lit one for Samuel, his heart full as he stood with Lucas, Clara, and Noah. "He's here," Lucas said, his voice soft. "He's in every light." Ethan nodded, tears falling. He felt Samuel in the warmth of the crowd, the strength of the community. He spoke at the vigil, reading a letter from Samuel. "Love is the only thing that lasts. Hold on to it, no matter what." The words resonated, a reminder of why Ethan kept fighting. The shelter hosted its first gala, a fundraiser to expand the network. Ethan designed the invitations, featuring Samuel's mural. Margaret attended, her first public show of support. She didn't speak, but she hugged Riley, who'd become like family to Ethan. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. After the gala, Noah pulled Ethan aside, showing him a new photo, a candid shot of Ethan laughing with Riley, the shelter's mural in the background. "This is you," Noah said. "This is your legacy too." Ethan's heart swelled. He wasn't just carrying Samuel's torch, was lighting his own. He kissed Noah under the stars, feeling a spark of something new. Not just love, but possibility. He didn't know what he was yet, but he knew who he was becoming. Someone his father would be proud of. The network's growth was relentless, a testament to Samuel's vision. Ethan worked late nights, coordinating with Jamie and Tara to secure funding and expand to other cities. They opened a second shelter in Los Angeles, with plans for Seattle and Chicago. Ethan's days were filled with grant applications, volunteer training, and mentoring kids like Riley, who'd started a queer youth art collective. Margaret became a regular at the shelter, her presence tentative but growing. She brought baked goods for the kids, listened to their stories, and slowly earned their trust. Ethan watched her change, but he kept his distance, still grappling with the years of betrayal. One day, she pulled him aside, holding a letter she'd written to Samuel, never sent. "I wrote this after he died," she said, her voice shaky. "I wanted to say I was sorry, but I couldn't face it." The letter apologized for her silence, her fear, her role in his exile. "I'm giving it to you now," she said. "I want you to know I'm trying." Ethan read the letter, his heart torn. He didn't know if he could fully forgive, but he saw her effort. "Keep showing up," he told her. "That's what matters." Noah was Ethan's anchor through it all. Their relationship grew, marked by quiet moments cooking together, walking along the bay, talking about the future. Noah encouraged Ethan to explore his identity, never pushing but always present. One night, Ethan admitted, "I think I might be queer. I don't know what kind yet, but I feel it." Noah grinned, pulling him close. "Welcome to the journey," he said. "You've got time." The shelter's success drew attention, and Ethan was invited to speak at a national LGBT conference in New York. He was nervous, but Lucas, Clara, and Noah came along, their support unwavering. On stage, Ethan shared Samuel's story, his own journey, and the network's mission. The audience gave a standing ovation, and Ethan felt his father's pride. Back in San Francisco, Ethan found a new letter in Samuel's box, one Clara had held back. It was written days before Samuel's death. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know I fought for you. Not just for your future, but for your heart. Be who you are, and love without fear." Ethan cried, but the tears were cathartic. He shared the letter with Noah, who suggested framing it for the shelter. "It's not just for you," Noah said. "It's for every kid who walks through that door." The shelter's mural became a local landmark, drawing visitors who left flowers and notes for Samuel. Ethan added a plaque, dedicating it to his father and the community he'd loved. Margaret helped unveil it, her hands shaking as she spoke. "I failed my husband," she said to the small crowd, "but I won't fail his legacy." Ethan hugged her, the first real embrace in years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. He felt Samuel in that moment, bridging the gap between them. The network's work continued, with Ethan and Noah leading a new initiative to train foster parents for queer youth. Riley graduated high school, accepted to an art school with Ethan's help, and gave him a painting of the mural as a thank you. Priya's final article chronicled the network's impact, calling Ethan Samuel's heir. He didn't feel like an heir, felt like a son, finally whole. He and Noah moved in together, a small apartment filled with photos of their chosen family. Ethan kept Samuel's jacket on a chair, a reminder of where he'd come from and where he was going. As winter approached, Ethan planned a holiday event at the shelter, a celebration for kids who had nowhere else to go. Margaret offered to cook, and Lucas and Clara volunteered to decorate. Ethan looked around at the community he'd built, feeling Samuel's love in every smile. He wasn't done uncovering truths, but he was done living in the shadows. The holiday event was a riot of color and warmth, the shelter packed with kids, volunteers, and allies. Ethan stood at the entrance, greeting each guest, Samuel's jacket slung over his shoulders. Noah was by his side, snapping photos, his smile a constant light. Margaret moved through the crowd, serving food and laughing with Riley, who'd become a leader among the youth. As the night wound down, Ethan took the stage, holding Samuel's final letter. "This is for my dad," he said, his voice steady. "He taught me that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose. You're my family now, and I'm so grateful." The room cheered, and Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. He looked at Margaret, who smiled through tears, and Noah, who squeezed his hand. Lucas and Clara stood in the back, their faces glowing with pride. This was Samuel's legacy, not just the shelter, but the love that filled it. After the event, Ethan and Noah walked to the bay, the city sparkling under a clear sky. Ethan wore the rainbow pin, a quiet declaration of his journey. "I think I'm ready," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "To live like he did, to love without fear." Noah kissed him, soft and sure. "You already are," he said. The next day, Ethan visited Samuel's grave, a small headstone in a San Francisco cemetery. He'd never been before, too overwhelmed by the truth. Now he knelt, placing a rainbow flag beside it. "I found you, Dad," he whispered. "I'm making it right." Margaret joined him, her first visit too. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, her hand brushing his. They stayed until the sun set, silent but together. Ethan knew their healing would take time, but it was possible now. The network expanded, with shelters opening across the country. Ethan became a national advocate, speaking at rallies and conferences, always carrying Samuel's journal. He and Noah grew closer, their love a quiet strength. Ethan still didn't have a label for himself, but he didn't need one. He was Ethan, Samuel's son, living boldly. One spring morning, Ethan got a call from Priya. She'd found a lost piece of Samuel's story, a recording of him speaking at a 1999 rally, his voice strong despite his illness. Ethan played it at the shelter, the words echoing. We fight for a world where no one has to hide. For our kids, our families, ourselves. Ethan looked at the faces around him. Riley, Jamie, Tara, Lucas, Clara, Margaret, Noah, and knew they'd won. Not just for Samuel, but for every kid who'd ever been told they weren't enough. The truth, once buried, was now a beacon, lighting the way for a better world. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.